And joining me on the show today, as always, is architect Bozimo. Good afternoon to you.
Hi, good afternoon, Gabriella. Great to be here.
Great to have you here as well. Also joining us on this conversation today is architect Tammy Somiari. Good afternoon to
Good
you.
afternoon, Gabriella. Thanks for
You're
having me once
welcome.
again.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. All right, so last week we did promise to continue our conversation,
Yes.
budging around the Ikoyi building collapse.
Yes.
Unfortunate, yes.
Sadly, the numbers have been rising since the last time we had a conversation till today.
Exactly.
The last I checked, it was about 43 people who had
I
been
heard
confirmed
44 as
dead.
of today.
45
Because of
confirmed
today,
dead, yes.
you
So-
know, it's pretty sad.
It's very sad. And, we all know that since that happened, the government has set up a panel of inquiry. They're going to do, some forensic investigation and all that. And hopefully more details about the collapse will be revealed. It's very important, I think, for the mentality that is used in the aviation industry, which you call black box thinking, to be applied. In the aviation industry, whenever anything goes wrong, they go to the source of what went wrong. They try and pinpoint it so that it would never happen again.
Right.
In many other fields, people tend to try to shield and hide, because nobody wants to really be seen to have done wrong. I think this could be a watershed moment where we can say never again.
Again, yeah.
Let's make sure that we find out what went wrong, we prevent it from happening so that there is confidence in our structures here. But never forget, as dramatic, as bad, as tragic, as horrible as this was, 99% of buildings, short and tall, don't collapse.
Exactly.
So clearly, this is an outlier. Things went wrong, and that is why they have the opportunity to uncover it.
So it's important that at this particular point in time, when things have the tendency of being sensationalized, the problem and the issue surrounding this is isolated and removed so that professionals can be able to still have that integrity. Those professionals out there that are carrying out their tasks and their assignments properly can still protect their integrity. So people don't just take it that, oh, building collapse, why should I, have this person, or why should I trust that person and all that. So it's necessary that we isolate the issue and remove the chaff from the wheat at this particular point in time. That's why we have connectivity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I saw another video during the week, I think on Friday or Thursday or so, and the person was making a reference to the Ikoyi building collapse, and it was a structure that was also finding its way down to the ground. I mean, it makes you begin to ask a lot of questions, and like you mentioned, architect Bozimo, it also makes you want to ask what really is the way forward. So let me ask you, architect Tammy, what are some of the things that we need to ensure as a matter of priority be put in place so that stuff like this doesn't happen ever again?
Well, thank you for that question. Architect Abia and I have been pondering and trying to brainstorm because, like we have seen or we have heard from from reports that it's not the first time that there have been efforts to prevent a collapse. So when we look at this one, it's like what is unique about it that has led to this. And so while we are talking of this particular incident, we're also looking at the general issue of collapse in general. So we've been able to explore some of the issues around this collapse and also some that could be deployed for building collapse generally. One of them would be the fact that there are lack of test centers, because these projects, when they are being embarked upon, you need to test the concrete strength. There are different kinds of tests that are conducted, the crush test, the slump test, and all of that. So we have labs in university, especially in Lagos. I understand there are 2 centers in Lagos where they conduct this test. Now, if you check the rate of development in Lagos vis-a-vis the number of test centers, you will know that it's a far cry from what we are supposed to be having. And so we need to have more of these, and they need to be well coordinated such that while projects are going on and people are coming in for tests, there are no discrepancies as to which belongs to where, and there's no mix-up. So I think there are a few lessons that can be learned from the respondents in the COVID-19 emergency outbreak in Wuhan, because it was like a logistic nightmare, but you see they were able to respond. They were able to set up 2 large medical facilities in a very short time.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that tells you the level of order. There must have been processes and procedures on ground that were followed. So we need to learn lessons from these kind of scenarios such that with the kind of developments we're having in Lagos, we'll be able to respond, you understand, in commensurate measure to the demand of building development. So that's one. 2 is the issue of authorities themselves being, understaffed or undermanned, because you need to have people that would come from the state authority to come and check to make sure that your building is to code and is to standard and you're following the right, procedure and everything is okay basically. So, but we understand that despite the fact that there are other challenges with them, they are usually very small in number compared to the vast area of land that is undergoing construction in Lagos. Right. So when you consider the footprint of building construction in Lagos versus the amount of people who actually go around to inspect, they are very, very small. And then also with the fact that, we have, even where you have people who go to supervise or check, they're intimidated at times depending on the kind of project. Like we saw in this particular project, it's a highbrow project in a very attractive area in Lagos, and obviously persons involved are top officials, some of them related to government. And what you find often in this scenario is a situation where you have mobile policemen at the gate or security and all that. So even if you send one local government official to go and check or inspect, when you see a mobile policeman standing at the gate, what do you do? What are your chances? Right. Do you understand? So these are some of the issues around regulatory authority and their supervision and their job in particular.
I mean, he's summarized a lot of what we discussed, because the kind of thing we deal with is solving problems. We solve problems when we do design. We solve problems when events like this unfortunately occur. It's part of the process thinking that an architect is trained. You have an issue, you go through certain rational steps, and then you come up with one solution or many. Exactly. All these can enter the entire arena of possibilities. Since at the moment, until that report is released, we don't yet know the specifics about what went wrong. Yes. But talking about the testing, you see, there's only stages. At every time you're pouring concrete, there are supposed to be some samples kept, retained, and then taken for testing, crushed and all that. Sometimes the best way to do it is right when the project is being commissioned. You get the testing authorities to independently come, so that it's not a case where the contractor or the builders are the ones feeding you with what they want you to see. These people are independently, literally linked with the authorities. So they have the authority to come to the site anytime concrete is being poured, and they also test the strength of the reinforcement of the because that structure, at least in that case, was a reinforced concrete structure. So it had both concrete and reinforcement working together. Structural engineers are the geniuses at making this happen, but you have to make sure that all the materials are actually per design. And so that's why it was worrying to me when I saw that letter from the structural consultant saying, you know what, they're not comfortable with certain elements. That was a big challenge or a red flag.
And then also concerning the letter, when we talk about liabilities, because I know you and I know that at this particular point, a lot of people want to know who should be held responsible, what somebody should be penalized for all the lives that have been lost and all of that. So when it comes to that, and in this particular scenario with the letter, although I think I understand that they've not been able to trace the origin of the letter, the phone numbers were not picking and all that kind of stuff. So, but
what would you expect? If you were the one in your shoes, we take a call. So
snap the same and get a new name.
I'm just trying to put the facts. I'm just trying to bring the facts in. So the thing is, for the consultants, we also haven't discussed this and looked at it critically. We believe that it shouldn't just stop at sending the letter to the client. You are supposed to take it a step further. Haven't noticed the extent, yes, discrepancy, and the potential damage, the potential risk or hazard involved. You ought to take it a step further to let the authorities know, or let at least a third party know, so that you can fully say that you have excused yourself.
In my view, you see, when you get a license to practice in any of the many of the professions, you're actually being vetted or certified by the state that you are permitted to practice. So in
you have a
terms of
responsibility. Yes.
When you are writing that letter, you should write to the regulatory authorities and copy the client.
Exactly.
Think about it, there's no motivation for a client
to stop what he's doing. Exactly.
To the authorities that, hey, my consultant has pulled out. Why would he do that? So as much as that letter emerged, at this moment, there was no evidence that it had been received by anybody. Maybe they have an office copy, but the one that went into circulation it could have been written on the day of the collapse.
Right.
It could have
Exactly.
been written at the real time. I'm not casting aspersions. We're just discussing this
Yeah.
dispassionately
Yeah.
based on what we have. So the way forward, just so that we are thinking, among other things, apart from better testing, better processes, better procedures, oversight, supervision, and all that, you can also have. There was a question you asked, very interesting. You said, "How, as an ordinary person,
Yes.
do I
You're not a
know
professional.
if I enter a building whether or not it has complied?"
Exactly.
That's a very good question, because you are not. There is no way you can know.
There's no way.
Yeah.
Now, we are saying that for an owner, what an owner can do during construction is actually insert certain technological probes
Yes. Or
into
sensors.
or sensors into, like right now on a car. If your car is having an issue, you can go to
An auto shop.
an auto shop, and they'll plug in a device, and from the screen of that device, they will read what the challenge is,
Right.
Yeah.
and at least begin to work towards solving it.
Exactly.
That same logic, without reinventing the wheel, can be used to put certain sensors and probes into
the
a building
building.
during construction.
Exactly.
And so the owner is having a second level of, if you will, assurance.
Quality. Yeah.
Telling himself, yes, I've given my consultants the responsibility and everything, but I am also making sure that if these are the readings that are supposed to happen in this column or in this beam at a certain time, that is within range. So that it's just when you go and do a blood test or any test in the
Yeah.
hospital, they tell you that the range of normal readings is from here to here.
Exactly.
And so when it's within that range, everything is okay.
Also-
when it's out of that range, they give you.
Yes. Also taking into consideration that the design itself was done through a structural simulation.
typically.
So before the design came out, there was some simulations that was run on the structural integrity of the building to ascertain what size of rebar should be put, how many columns, and all that. So whenever there's a failure in that simulation, whoever is designing it knows. So whenever you take that simulation and you take it to site with the technology in place, also this technology has to also be vis-a-vis with the design. So the
Of
architect
course.
has to be taken along, because
Of
you are the ones that will
course.
incorporate this kind of technology in the building. Now, when you take your simulation and you put it at par, you say at this floor, I have this load, I have that load. Is it equal to what we have on site? Can we have the same result? And where there is a discrepancy, you already know. Do you understand? With that device you have planted in the building. Sorry, I've taken so much
So
time.
this obviously is a call for responsibility
Exactly.
from these professionals.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Be more proactive
Professionals.
as much as possible, to be more proactive and take steps either from the side of the professional, the side of the client, to see what you can do to ensure that, I was even thinking if there can be a rating, so to speak, to say, well, this building has met so and so rating
Met or
by
exceeded.
exactly or
Yes.
exceeded. Do you
Met or
understand?
exceeded.
So that you, the public or whoever you are that is coming, you can be able to say, well, going by this and that. So when we talk about standard, although again we know when we talk about standard in Nigeria, they're like water and oil that doesn't mix.
But we have
So,
SON.
but we have to start from somewhere.
Yeah.
So because looking at all of these realities, I'm just trying
Now,
to be
quick
sure.
question though.
Yeah.
Do we have any testing centers in Port Harcourt?
Yes, we
Oh
do.
yes. Oh yes.
How many of them do we have?
There is UST. I know there are more than one,
Yes.
but the one that is most reliable for most projects is in UST. River State
RSU
University,
now.
RSU now.
RSU.
Yes, so that's where most people get reliable test
Does it
results from.
cater to the needs that we have in the States?
Yes, it does. Yes, the facility or the technology they have in their lab, yes, it meets the standard
Absolutely,
required.
it does.
Yes. So you can be rest assured that most of the projects that go on here, the testing that they do comes from River State University, and their facility is up to standard.
And it's worth, making reference to that unfortunate collapse that happens here. I
Right.
always make mention of the
Yes,
fact
the one
that
happened in 2019.
yes,
Yes.
the fact is those buildings seem to succeed up to the point where they fail.
Yes.
So ask yourself, what seems to have happened is
Right.
that
At some
up to
point,
that point,
yes.
the materials were functioning sufficiently, let's
Yes.
say sufficiently. But when you cross a certain material characteristic and strength, then you can have those very sudden, sad
failures.
And typically what happens is that the structural engineer, right from the start, conceives of what is intended and designs to that standard, and
Awesome.
also puts in a percentage over.
Proceed.
But so that's why somebody could maybe add a small deck out of light corrugated concrete without causing a problem. But by the time you are now adding
Repeating it.
actual levels,
Excessive.
That goes beyond
that
the safety
goes
factor.
beyond the safety factor. That is why the building was okay up to floor 19.
Now, is it possible, based off of what you just said, is it possible to judge material to design wrongly from the part of the professionals?
No, by the time we've gone through school, we will select the appropriate material, for any given job. And let's be honest, it's not a wide range of materials. We have reinforced concrete structures, we have steel structures. Most of those high rises, 100 stories and above, you see them made out of steel, for the simple reason that steel is very versatile. It doesn't, if you want a column that's going to support 100 stories, it's going to be so large it will take up the whole floor space.
Besides the rebars you put
with steel, you can have a lighter frame that can carry amazing weight. So we know the right material to use. And then another factor is the cost. How much are you ready to spend to achieve a certain goal? So there's that balance.
Don't also forget the technology involved in installing the materials. All of this you have to consider while you are making your design. And also that brings me to something else before we run out of time. Now we are talking about this issue, and we know that the question we might need to ask is, why do people actually compromise the standard? Okay, so we need to consider why people would want to compromise the standard and see how we can cater for that as well. Right. Do you understand? He's talking about being proactive also as professionals. Someone wants to cut cost. So we need to look at, okay, let's look at the entire spectrum from when the person acquires the land to when the house is built. Where are the excesses we can trim off in terms of cost, so that this person doesn't have an excuse tomorrow to say, oh, because you professionals charge too high, that's why I decided to patronize a quack, or one thing or the other. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. So I'm just trying to see how we can be more proactive in forestalling this kind of situation as professionals.
The truth is that there is an irreducible minimum cost you will spend on a project.
Yes.
And that is something that a potential developer must keep in mind. You cannot go below that. The bottom.
Okay, so we're going to have to wrap up now, but let's quickly take these comments. It's from Franco Chiadico with confidence. It says the reason for the building collapse: destroying any nation does not require the use of atomic bombs or the use of long-range missiles. It only requires lowering the quality of education and allowing cheating in the examinations by students. Building collapse at the hand of such an engineer. The collapse of education is the collapse of the nation. So I think what he's trying to say is maybe our educational systems.
Yes.
They're all causative factors.
Exactly.
They all contribute.
Okay, so this will be my last question as a wrap up. Do you think perhaps while you were speaking, I think Tammy, and talking about the need for standing up and rising to the responsibility on the part of the professionals, do you think perhaps it would help if there is some form of regulation or punishments? That's a strong word, but if there is some price to pay
consequence
for exactly, that's the word I'm looking for. So do you think perhaps if there is some consequence for working below that standard?
There are consequences. I mentioned this just in passing. When you get the proper professionals, we have something to lose.
Yes.
Our ability to practice and earn a living
legally.
So
that's a
if
consequence.
you work with a professional, so let's also be very real. A person who can be the proprietor of such a massive and amazing building is likely to be literally a force of nature in real life. Right. You need a professional who can stand up to the person and politely and cautiously guide the person to do the right thing, or pull out if the person doesn't want to listen, and have the guts to write to the authority and say, I have pulled out of that project and I consider XYZ to be dangerous. Those are some of the things that have to happen. If you don't do that, if you get people, if you will call them non-licensed people, then they can be pushed around by the owner. So there are a lot of factors, but we're still waiting. The story is still unfolding, and hopefully.
And when you talk about consequence, also generally, I think the political will concerning what he's talking about, education now, breakdown and failure of system. When you look at it, it cuts across, political will. You understand? If you say there is a consequence, you can put regulation around anything. But if there is a will, there is an honest will to stop these things and put a system in place, we will get the results we need.
All right, sadly, we have to wrap up now. Very short time we do have, but I'm looking forward to next Tuesday already. Interesting conversation. Thank you so much for your time, architect.
You're welcome.
And yes, have yourselves a lovely afternoon.
You too.
All right, thank you so much for joining us on the conversation, for your thoughts and comments. Next week, Tuesday, 2 p.m., the conversation